Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Starlight Channel. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Maybe your day was long, or maybe you're simply looking for a calm voice to help you unwind and drift into sleep. Tonight, we'll take a gentle journey where science becomes a story and curiosity leads us softly into dreams. In the beginning, the earth was not quiet. It was fire, a sphere of molten rock turning in a darkness lit only by its own glow. The air was not yet air, it was gas and flame, filled with the breath of creation. Lightning split the smoke, mountains rose and fell within hours. The planet was young, wild, unformed, a heart still learning to beat. Deep inside that fiery chaos, something began to happen. Iron, heavier than all else, began to sink. Piece by piece, molten droplets of metal fell toward the planet's center, merging, colliding, fusing into a single growing core. It was a descent of gravity and heat, billions of tons of iron raining inward, gathering at the very heart of the world. The temperature rose higher than the surface of the sun's photosphere, nearly 7,000 degrees. Pressure crushed every atom tighter, turning liquid into something dense and glowing, a metallic ocean held within rock. And when at last the iron reached the center, it formed a single body, the Earth's core, the hidden sun that would burn without flame for billions of years. That was the true birth of the planet. Before continents, before oceans, before life, there was only this slow, endless gathering of heat. It was the forge that would shape everything to come. Every mountain, every tide, every breath of wind was born from the energy locked deep within that central fire. The formation of the core was a violent act, but it was also the beginning of order. Gravity had drawn chaos into harmony. The planet had found balance, dense at the center, lighter at the surface. For the first time, the Earth had a structure, a spine, a heart. As the molten iron churned and flowed, it began to move like a vast metallic storm, currents rising and falling, spiraling with the rotation of the planet. This motion created something invisible but vital, a magnetic field. The Earth became a magnet, its lines of force stretching far into space, wrapping the world in a cocoon of protection. From that moment, the planet began to shield itself from the storms of the sun. The magnetic field was the first sign that the Earth's heart was alive. It pulsed, it hummed, it sang in silence, a deep, invisible music that reached far beyond the sky. Without it, the newborn atmosphere would have been torn away by solar wind. The seas, if they ever formed, would have boiled into nothing. But the field held. It turned chaos into continuity. Above, the surface began to cool. What had once been rivers of magma hardened into crust. Volcanoes still roared, oceans of lava still moved, but their fury slowed. In that cooling, there was transformation, the planet learning how to contain its heat, how to live with it. The crust cracked and reformed again and again, like skin thickening after fire. It was the beginning of patience. The core, however, remained restless. It rotated at its own pace, slightly faster than the surface, an inner rhythm, independent yet connected. Heat from radioactive decay and residual energy from formation kept it molten, kept it alive. Through convection, the slow circular movement of liquid metal, it continued to feed the magnetic field. This, in turn, shaped the sky, influenced the flow of water, and guided the evolution of life long before life itself existed. Imagine standing at the surface then. Though no human could, the ground would shake with constant thunder. The sky would be a storm of ash and lightning, and beneath, invisible, the great engine of the Earth would be roaring, spinning, sending waves of magnetism into the void. A planet in its infancy, both fragile and furious. But even in that chaos, something gentle was beginning. The core, though blazing, was already cooling, very slowly, atom by atom. Heat escaped upward, through mantle and crust, through volcanoes and fissures, through the radiant energy that reached into space. Each escape of heat was a heartbeat, a rhythm of release. It was the planet's first act of balance, learning to let go. Over millions of years, the surface changed color. Red became black. Black became blue as vapor condensed and rain fell for the first time. Oceans formed, steaming and wild, covering the cooling crust. And beneath those oceans, the heat continued to rise, shaping the seafloor, driving convection currents that moved continents before continents even had names. The Earth's core was the artist. Its heat drew lines, raised mountains, carved valleys. Its motion created magnetism that painted invisible arcs around the world. Its energy powered volcanoes that built new land, even as erosion wore old land away. Every process we see on the surface is a whisper from below. Even now, billions of years later, that same heart still beats. It has grown quieter, but it has not stopped. Seismographs record its tremors. Satellites trace its magnetic breath. We can map it, model it, imagine it, but we cannot touch it. No drill, no machine, no probe has ever reached it. The core remains untouchable, a secret kept under nearly 3,000 kilometers of stone. And yet, its story is written everywhere. In the compass needle that points north, in the auroras that shimmer near the poles, in the alignment of minerals frozen in lava long ago. All of these are memories of the planet's inner fire, evidence of the deep motion that keeps the Earth alive. The core is not a single flame, but two. The outer core, liquid and restless, and the inner core, solid and bright with pressure. The inner core formed later when enough heat escaped for the iron to crystallize. That crystallization releases energy, the final act of creation still unfolding inside the Earth. It is a paradox of cooling and renewal. As the core freezes, it fuels the planet's dynamo anew. In this balance between solid and liquid, between motion and rest, lies the secret of Earth's endurance. If the core ever stopped moving, the magnetic field would fade, the atmosphere would unravel, and the surface would be left unshielded, naked beneath the solar wind. But for now, the fire continues. It moves slowly, but it moves. It cools, but it lives. Scientists estimate that the core loses heat at a rate of about 100 billion watts, an unthinkable flow of energy, yet gentle when measured across the vastness of the world. That heat escapes through plumes in the mantle, rising columns that drive volcanoes, earthquakes, and the drift of continents. The continents themselves, our mountains, our homes, are carried by the breath of the planet's heart. Every earthquake, every volcano, every shifting plate is the surface echo of the deep. We often think of the Earth as solid, unmoving, but it is not. It is alive with motion, alive with quiet fire. The ground beneath our feet is the skin of a living world. As the core continues to cool, the pace of that motion will slow. Volcanoes will become rarer, earthquakes fewer. The planet will grow quieter. It will not die, but it will rest. The same way a storm fades into calm, the same way music softens into silence. But for now, deep below, the iron ocean still flows. It swirls in massive loops, generating electric currents that sustain the magnetic field. It hums in a voice older than mountains. That voice can be heard faintly in the vibrations that pass through the crust. the deep, slow waves recorded by seismometers across the globe. When those waves reach the surface, they tell us that the core is not silent. It speaks in rhythm, in warmth, in gravity. The Earth's core is its soul, unseen but felt in every tremor and every breeze. It is both the oldest and youngest part of the planet, still forming, still cooling, still shaping the world we live upon. It reminds us that everything stable is built upon motion, that peace is not the absence of energy, but its balance, that even in silence there can be fire. And somewhere far below the crust, that fire still flickers. It burns in iron and nickel in molten spirals that have never known light. It turns at a pace just slightly faster than the world above it, as if keeping time for the rest of the planet, an invisible metronome beneath the crust. Every second of every day, it whispers the same quiet promise. The world is still alive, and though the heart of Earth is cooling, it is not yet done with its story. The heat of the Earth's core does not stay buried. It rises gently but persistently through layers of rock and pressure, seeking balance with the cold of space. This flow of energy, silent, invisible, eternal, is what gives the surface of our planet its restless beauty. Every mountain, every ocean, every trembling of the ground owes its existence to that hidden warmth below. From the moment the molten iron heart began to spin, convection became the language of the deep. Hot material rose, cooled, and sank again in endless cycles, creating slow currents within the mantle, the thick, viscous layer between the core and the crust. These currents are unimaginably vast, moving continents as if they were leaves floating on molten wind. A single cycle can take hundreds of millions of years, yet its consequences shape everything we see above. When the first continents formed, they did so because the Earth could no longer keep its heat inside. Volcanoes became vents for its breath. Through those fiery openings, the planet exhaled gases, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, steam. From that exhalation came the first atmosphere, thin and strange, but full of potential. When rain finally fell from the cooling skies, it met a crust still scarred with molten scars. The hiss of water meeting magma was the sound of creation, the beginning of oceans, the first step toward the world we know. Beneath those seas, heat continued to rise. Where it found weakness, it erupted, forming ridges that crossed the seafloor like scars of light. Lava poured out and hardened into new crust, while old crust sank back down into the mantle to be melted and reborn. Thus began the endless dance of plate tectonics, a planetary rhythm driven entirely by the core's remaining fire. The continents themselves are passengers in this movement. They drift, collide, and part again, building mountains where they meet and tearing open oceans where they separate. It is a slow, graceful ballet, invisible to the human eye, yet unstoppable in its motion. Every time you stand on a mountain ridge, you are standing on the crest of a frozen wave of stone, pushed upward by the planet's own heartbeat. Even the most still landscape is a snapshot of movement. The Himalayas rise a few millimeters each year. The Pacific plate slides beneath Asia. The Atlantic grows wider as molten rock pushes upward from its center. The surface of Earth is a skin in motion, shaped by the warmth below. This heat also powers volcanoes, the planet's natural release valves. When pressure builds too high, the Earth opens a vent and breathes out molten rock and gas. Volcanoes are not signs of destruction, but of balance. They are reminders that the world must exhale to remain alive. Each eruption is a whisper from the deep, a message from the core. I am still here. As the Earth aged, its core began to cool, but the cooling was not uniform. The outer layers lost heat faster, while the inner layers held onto it stubbornly. This imbalance created gradients, and gradients create motion. Heat flowed upward, cold sank downward. The cycle continued. Even now, after billions of years, that circulation has not ceased. It is this motion, slow, powerful, eternal, that maintains the magnetic field surrounding the Earth. Within the outer core, molten iron moves like a sea of metal, conducting electric currents that generate magnetism. That field extends far beyond the atmosphere, creating a protective bubble called the magnetosphere. It shields our planet from solar wind, deflecting high-energy particles that would otherwise strip the atmosphere away. Without it, the Earth would be as lifeless as Mars, its surface scorched by radiation, its oceans lost to space. The field also gives direction. For centuries, travelers have followed the pull of compasses, tracing invisible lines that connect every corner of the globe. Those lines are born in the movement of molten iron thousands of kilometers below. Every migration, every voyage across the sea, every explorer guided by the north, all of them, unknowingly, followed the rhythm of the Earth's heart. But magnetic fields are not eternal. They shift, they waver, they even reverse. Every few 100,000 years, the poles trade places. North becomes south, south becomes north. This reversal is not a catastrophe, but a sign that the planet is alive and dynamic. Even in cooling, the Earth continues to change. The core may be losing energy, but it is gaining complexity. There are places where this deep heat reveals itself more directly: geothermal springs, fumaroles, the glowing vents of the ocean floor. There, at the bottom of the sea, where no sunlight reaches, heat from the core escapes in shimmering clouds of mineral-rich water. Around those vents, life has found a way to thrive. Creatures live in darkness, drawing energy not from sunlight, but from the chemistry of the deep. Their existence proves that life does not need light, only energy and patience. In this way, the heat of the core becomes not just the foundation of geology, but the cradle of biology itself. As continents drift and collide, mountains rise and erode, oceans open and close, the flow of heat beneath continues, steady, faithful, undisturbed by the surface dramas of ice and fire. Civilizations rise and fall in the time it takes for a single mantle current to move 100 kilometers. Empires crumble, languages fade, yet the core remains, whispering its quiet song of balance. Every earthquake we feel is a conversation between the deep and the surface, a pulse of adjustment, a reminder that we live atop a moving world. To us, the shaking feels sudden, but to the planet, it is just another slow breath. Nothing here is truly still. Even the solid ground is part of an endless migration, guided by forces older than the moon. If the Earth could speak, it might tell us that warmth is not the opposite of peace. The fire below is not rage, it is endurance. It burns not to destroy, but to hold the world together. It is the quiet persistence of energy seeking balance, the same principle that keeps stars alive, that drives winds and tides, that shapes the pulse of life itself. Over time, as more heat escapes, the core will cool further. The mantle will move more slowly, the continents will settle, the volcanoes will sleep longer between breaths. But even as the planet quiets, it will not become lifeless. It will remember motion, and memory itself is a form of life. Long after humanity has gone, long after the seas have changed and the air has thinned, the core will still turn, glowing softly, keeping time with the slow rhythm of the cosmos. Its warmth will be fainter, its voice dimmer, but its song will continue. And if any being, somewhere, someday, were to place a hand against the stone and listen closely enough, they might still feel it, the faint, steady heartbeat of a world that never truly stopped moving. The magnetic field begins where light does not reach. It rises from the motion of metal in darkness, from iron and nickel flowing in slow spirals around a solid heart, and then extends outward beyond rock and cloud to touch the solar wind. It is the Earth's most patient language, invisible lines of force threading the space around the planet, turning chaos into shape, guiding particles, bending storms of charged sunlight into auroral veils. If the core is the heart of the world, the field is its breath, down where pressure turns metal into liquid glass and heat moves like weather. The outer core turns over upon itself. Hot iron rises, cool iron sinks. The planet rotates, and that rotation twists the currents into helices, organizing motion that would otherwise be random. In those spirals, electric charges move. Where charges move, magnetism appears. Where magnetism appears, it reinforces the flows that created it. Thus, the geodynamo sustains itself, motion birthing field, field shaping motion, a feedback so steady it has lasted for billions of years. Nothing about this is hurried. Convection cells in the outer core can span thousands of kilometers. A full pattern may drift and change on timescales longer than civilizations. Yet at the surface, we feel its presence in ways both subtle and grand. A compass needle settling toward north is a translation of deep metal into a quiet gesture of iron at your fingertips. The green and crimson curtains that ripple near the poles are the sky's reply to the core's whisper, sunlight re-sung in Earth's own key. The field is not a static shell, it is a living shape. It dips inward near the poles where lines are open to space. It bulges at the equator. It trails into a long magnetic tail on the night side where the solar wind stretches it thin. Inside this magnetosphere, belts of trapped particles circle like ghostly rivers. The Van Allen belts, their paths curved by the field's gentle insistence. When the sun exhales more strongly, sending coronal mass ejections across space, the magnetosphere flexes. Reconnection snaps and rejoins field lines like taut strings. Energy stored in the tail slings particles back toward the poles. Auroras brighten. The upper atmosphere swells. Faint currents flow through the ground and along long wires. For a night, the planet and the star sing together, two instruments in one storm. Even in calm years, the field meanders. It wanders by degrees, strong here, softer there, as core flows rearrange. Maps of intensity are like weather charts for a world beneath our feet. Gyres, streams, eddies in molten metal showing up as swirls in magnetism far above. There are regions where the field thins. The South Atlantic anomaly is one such bruise, a place where satellites feel extra radiation as they pass. It is not a wound, but a reminder. The field has texture. The dynamo has moods. Stone remembers those moods. When lava cools, iron-bearing minerals align with the magnetic field of their moment and lock that direction in place as they crystallize. Layer upon layer, ocean floors spread and freeze, recording stripes of alternating magnetic polarity like bars of ancient music. On continents, basalts keep the same memory. Baked clays and lake sediments hold fainter echoes. From these rocks, we learn that Earth's magnetic poles have reversed many times. North becomes south, south becomes north. The field weakens, shivers, reorganizes, and then regains its strength with the opposite sign. Each reversal spans thousands of years, too slow for panic, fast enough to be felt by the stone. Between full reversals, there are excursions, brief, incomplete wanderings when the poles stray far from home and then return. The Lachamp event about 40,000 years ago was one such detour. For a short span in geologic time, the field's strength dipped and its direction roamed, then slowly settled back into its present orientation. Life continued. Skies brightened more easily at low latitudes. Upper air took on a little more solar wind. The planet adjusted, as it always does. What begins these changes lies at the boundary where imagination is required. The core-mantle interface, a landscape of topography and heat. There, the hot fluid of the outer core meets the cooler rock of the mantle. Heat leaks upward in patches. Some regions drain the core briskly, others insulate. The mantle itself has its own slow currents, its own plumes and slabs, its own cold fingers reaching downward from subducted seafloor. Together, they sculpt the pattern of core convection from above, as the core sculpts the field from below. It is an old duet, stone guiding metal, metal guiding space. Inside the core, there are rhythms within rhythms. Seismology hints that the solid inner core may rotate at a pace slightly different from the mantle, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, a super-rotation measured in fractions of a degree per year. There are torsional oscillations, too, shallow planet-scale waves that race through the molten iron like ripples on a steel sea, completing a lap every few years. When these waves reach the core mantle boundary, they modulate the field we feel, as if the heart sent a pulse all the way to the skin. The magnetic field does more than draw auroras and steer compasses. Creatures carry it inside them. Birds trace long arcs across oceans using magnetoreception, proteins and crystals that shift in response to the field, turning Earth's geometry into a sense. Sea turtles imprint on it to find natal beaches. Salmon taste it in the dark waters between continents. Bacteria align like needles, swimming along invisible rails in mud. The core's invisible breath has always been part of the planet's grammar for life. When the field grows restless, the world remains calm. During storms, radios hiss, polar skies brighten, long wires feel currents they did not ask for. We build our machines with that in mind, grounding them, shielding them, learning to listen and to yield. It is not combat, it is accommodation, civilization remembering that it is housed within a magnet, not outside of it. Cooling changes every movement. As the core sheds heat into the mantle, convection in the outer core evolves. The inner core, slowly crystallizing, releases latent heat and lighter elements into the liquid around it, buoyancy that stirs the dynamo anew. For now, this compositional buoyancy is a sustaining gift. Even as thermal energy declines, the act of freezing feeds motion. But gifts have lifetimes. Far ahead, when the inner core has grown large and the heat flow across the boundary falls below the threshold for vigorous convection, the dynamo will quiet. Planets offer examples. Mars, smaller and swiftly cooled, once had a magnetic field. Ancient rocks on its surface are magnetized, bearing witness to a dynamo that died. With the field gone, the solar wind could scrub at the atmosphere more easily. Over eons, the sky thinned, water vanished to ground ice and space, and a world of rivers fell silent. Mercury, dense and close to the sun, somehow clings to a weak magnetic field, a small dynamo still turning. Venus, hot and slow, lacks a global field, but wears a sheath of ionized air that the solar wind shapes directly. Earth sits among these stories as the long-lived middle way, big enough to hold heat, active enough to stir metal, lucky enough to keep its shield. What happens here when the field finally fades will not be sudden. It will be a centuries and millennia process, a descending cadence. Intensity will waver. The map of strength will grow mottled. Compasses will become instruments of local knowledge rather than global truth. Auroras will broaden their range. Satellites will need kinder orbits, kinder skins. The atmosphere will feel the sun's breath more directly, but gravity will hold the heavy air close. Oceans will not leap to space. Mountains will not crumble because polarity changed. The world will simply be more open to the star that made it, a little brighter in high skies, a little busier at the edge of day. In that future, the core will still be there, but quieter. The outer shell of liquid will move more reluctantly. The inner core will be large and serene, its crystals aligned in patterns grown over ages. Heat will still flow upward into mantle and crust, driving gentle tectonics if any remain, feeding the last volcanoes, warming the last springs. The magnetic field will be a memory recorded in rock like the rings of trees, in sediments like breaths, and even as it fades, the planet will keep another kind of order, the order of gravity and orbit, of sunlight and dark, of tides that move not only with magnetism, but with the moon's faithful pull. Between now and then, the field will continue its soft variations. The North Magnetic Pole will keep walking across the map, a traveler over ice and water. Surveyors will update charts, pilots will shift headings, whales will follow lines we cannot see. Children will learn that north is not a place, but a conversation between sky and stone. At night, near winter coasts, the aurora will come like a slow tide of light, and people will stand under it quietly, as if listening to the core itself speak. There is humility in this. Beneath our cities, beneath our names for land and sea, lives an engine that neither asks for attention nor stops in protest. It turns because it cools. It cools because it turns. And from that balance flows a world. We can model it, measure it, trace its influence across centuries of rock and sky, but we cannot command it. We can only live within its kindness and prepare gently for its eventual rest. When the dynamo's voice grows faint, the planet will not become less itself. The continents will remember their long drift, the oceans, their long echo, the winds, their routes around mountains carved by older fires. The sun will rise, the moon will lift the seas, the days will lengthen with the slow march of tidal time, and deep below, the inner core will sit like a lantern in a house whose rooms no longer need light, a bright archive of the energy that shaped the surface long ago. If, in that far era, an observer pressed a compass to the ground and found it indecisive, they might look up instead, not for a needle's answer, but for the aurora's trace, for the moon's tide, for the simple arc of the sun. They would be reading newer alphabets of the same old story. Earth in balance with its star, with its satellite, with the quiet of its own interior. The planet's voice would be softer, but not silent. It would speak through heat and stone, through tides and time, through the faint, lingering memory of magnetism written in every cooled lava flow and every drift of iron sand. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth of all, that the field, wondrous as it is, was never the point by itself. It was a chapter in the larger book of a planet learning how to live. From fire to field, from field to calm, Earth has practiced the art of endurance. The core still turns, the field still arcs, and one day both will rest. But the story, the slow exchange of heat for form, of motion for memory, will go on in other languages, other rhythms, other kinds of light. For now, the aurora breathes at the poles. Compasses settle with a small, satisfied twitch. The South Atlantic anomaly glides westward like a cloud. Satellites dip and rise, listening. And under 3,000 kilometers of stone, iron flows in the dark, writing the sky with lines no eye can see. planet's heart is cooling, yes, but while it cools, it sings. In the silence, after each geomagnetic storm, the field settles again. Lines that were stretched and tangled relax back into their patient shapes, looping from pole to pole. Far above, the aurora fades to thin green threads. The sky exhales its color. Down below, the molten metal continues its slow dance, unbothered by the flickers of light it has caused. The dynamo keeps turning, steady as a drumbeat beneath the crust. It is a rhythm older than continents, yet as present as your own pulse. Every heartbeat you feel is echoed, on another scale, in the swirl of the core. Both are patterns of motion that maintain warmth, that hold order against cold. The same laws that govern cells and stars govern this liquid sphere beneath us. Heat seeking balance, energy turning to flow, flow becoming harmony. If we could listen deeply enough, we might hear it, not as sound, but as presence. A vibration older than life, a low note that never stops playing. The magnetic field is that note made visible, its melody stretched across space, its echoes lighting the sky. To study it is to eavesdrop on the heartbeat of the planet. When scientists map the field, they are not capturing stillness, but a moment in a moving symphony. The data drift with time, new instruments replace old ones, patterns change like the shifting of seasons. Yet beneath the complexity lies simplicity. Earth is cooling, and in that cooling it creates motion. In motion it finds order. In order it protects what it has made. Someday that sequence will slow, the field will wane, then wander, then fade. The sky will grow quieter, the poles less defined until only traces remain in the stones. But even then, the memory of magnetism will not vanish. It will live in the alignment of minerals, in the symmetry of crystals, in the auroral ovals fossilized in history. It will be another story written in matter, the memory of how the world once sang. And perhaps that is enough. Not every song must last forever. Some are meant to echo, to leave resonance behind. The Earth's magnetic field is such a song, born from fire, sustained by motion, fading into memory. Its legacy is not only in the protection it offers, but in the pattern it teaches, that power can be silent, that endurance can be gentle, that even in cooling there can be creation. The next time the compass points north or the aurora ripples through polar skies, it is worth pausing to remember where that beauty begins, in darkness, in pressure, in molten patience. The field is not separate from us. We live inside it. It touches every breath, every circuit, every thought. It is the unseen kindness that holds the fragile air in place, the quiet geometry that keeps the sun at a respectful distance. When the last shimmer of green light fades from the night and the world returns to ordinary shadow, the field continues, unseen but faithful. Deep below, the iron ocean rolls on. Each motion of that hidden sea writes a new line of magnetism, a new curve in the sky. It is the handwriting of the Earth's heart, slow, graceful, and alive. The world cools, yes, but not into silence. It cools into wisdom, into balance, into the calm strength of a planet that has learned how to turn heat into harmony. Deep within the planet, far below the reach of drills or dreams, the Earth's core cools, not quickly, not evenly, but with a patience that only a world can possess. Every century, every millennium, it loses a little more heat, a slow exhalation of fire that began billions of years ago and will continue long after we are gone. The surface knows nothing of this breath. It feels only the faint echo, the shifting of continents, the rise of mountains, the trembling of earthquakes, but the true change is invisible, unfolding 3,000 kilometers below, where pressure crushes matter into something unlike anything found above. There, in the dark center of the planet, a transformation is taking place. The outer core, a vast sea of molten iron and nickel, swirls endlessly around the solid inner core. As the Earth cools, atoms within that liquid iron begin to slow, to settle, to crystallize. Tiny seeds of solid metal form, drifting like snowflakes in a storm of fire. They fall inward, joining the inner core, adding layer upon layer of shining crystal. Each new crystal releases heat and lighter elements into the liquid above. That release stirs the outer core, feeding the currents that sustain the magnetic field. So even as the heart of the Earth freezes, it also renews itself. The solidification is not a death. It is a heartbeat, a steady rhythm of creation through cooling. The inner core grows by about 1 millimeter each year. It sounds small, but across the span of time, it is immense. In the billion years since its birth, it has expanded into a sphere more than 1,200 kilometers across, a glowing orb of iron crystal turning gently inside its liquid shell. The pressure there is beyond imagining, more than 3 million times that of the air we breathe. The temperature's over 5,000 degrees Celsius, as hot as the surface of the sun. And yet, even in that inferno, order is forming. The iron crystals align under the crushing force, growing in long vertical patterns that run north to south. This alignment gives the inner core texture like the grain of wood. It may even cause the core to rotate slightly faster than the rest of the planet, a silent drift measured only through the faint echoes of earthquakes. Those seismic waves passing through the deep reveal a hidden architecture, the geometry of crystallization inside the planet's heart. Scientists listen to those echoes as one might listen to music muffled through walls. The signals are faint, the patterns subtle, but they tell a story of transformation. They show that the inner core is not uniform, that one side grows faster than the other, that its crystal lattice is tilted as if the very process of freezing is uneven, guided by the flow of heat and the pull of the planet's rotation. It is a reminder that even deep within stillness, there is asymmetry, the quiet signature of lifelike motion. The heat that escapes from the core travels upward, through the mantle, through slow currents of rock that move like honey under pressure. It emerges at the surface as volcanoes, as geothermal springs, as the restless motion of continents. Every eruption, every tremor, every new crust that forms at the mid-ocean ridges carries with it a fragment of that ancient warmth. The fire that began at the center of the world still finds its way into the sky. But heat is a finite gift. Each year, a little less remains. The radiogenic elements that once fueled the core's warmth decay into silence. The mantle cools, convection slows, the planet grows quieter, the continents drift more slowly, the earthquakes fewer, the volcanoes more still. It is not the end of the world, but the deep sigh of one who has lived long and seen much. Cooling changes everything. It changes the strength of the magnetic field, the pattern of tectonics, the pace of the Earth's spin. Even the length of our days, the measure by which we live, is shaped by this invisible process. As the molten core loses heat, the whole planet becomes more stable, more deliberate. The Earth's rotation slows by milliseconds each century, a rhythm so subtle we barely notice it, but one that marks the planet's gradual transition from fire to peace. There was a time when the Earth's surface glowed red with molten rock, when a day lasted only 6 hours, when the moon hung much closer in the sky. Then came rain, oceans, continents, forests, civilizations, all unfolding under the steady slowing of the world. Every heartbeat of life, every tide and season, every breath has been shaped by that hidden cooling below. Now, in the modern age, we live during the planet's middle years, not as young as fire, not as old as silence. The core is still liquid, still alive, still moving, but its energy is fading. The field it generates flickers and shifts. Deep flows rearrange, polarity wanders, new patterns emerge in the unseen sea of molten iron. The heart of Earth is learning slowly to rest. Far into the future, perhaps billions of years from now, the cooling will reach its final stage. The outer core will solidify completely, joining the inner core in stillness. Without that fluid motion, the magnetic field will fade. The protective shield that has wrapped the planet for so long will dissolve into space. Solar wind will begin to touch the upper atmosphere, drawing away particles over millions of years. The Earth will not vanish, but it will grow bare, its air thinner, its oceans quieter, its sky more fragile. And yet, even then, the core will not be cold. It will glow softly with residual heat, the last ember of the planet's original fire. That glow will persist for billions more years, long after the sun itself has begun to die. The Earth's heart will cool, yes, but it will cool with grace, step by step, as if descending into a long and peaceful sleep. Cooling, after all, is not failure. It is fulfillment. The Earth does not rage against the loss of heat. It yields to it, as a candle yields to its own light fading. Every world in the cosmos follows the same law: to burn, to shine, to cool, to rest. In that cycle lies the story of all things, stars, planets, and hearts alike. If you could stand at the edge of time and look back, you would see the planet's inner fire as a long, slow heartbeat, one that began bright and fierce, then softened, then settled into stillness. You would see that nothing was wasted. Every pulse of heat became mountains, air, oceans, and life. And when that warmth was no longer needed, it returned quietly to the dark, leaving beauty in its wake. The Earth's core is not dying. It is becoming crystal, becoming calm, becoming memory. It is turning energy into structure, chaos into harmony, motion into peace. It is teaching us in silence that endurance is not the same as stillness, that to slow is not to end, but to deepen. The quiet cooling of the core is the slowest story ever told, a story written not in words, but in the geometry of atoms, in the dance of iron under impossible pressure. It is the story of how a world learns to rest, and how, in resting, it becomes eternal. When the fire beneath begins to rest, the world above changes its shape of motion. It does not stop, it softens. The mountains still rise, but more slowly. The seas still breathe, but with quieter tides. The planet that once roared with storms of lava now speaks in whispers. The gentle creak of plates, the murmur of shifting stone. The Earth is a machine powered by temperature. The difference between the blazing core and the cool surface drives every current, every wind, every wave of rock beneath the crust. As that difference shrinks, the machine slows. The deep convection cells that once moved continents like icebergs through molten seas begin to weaken. Mantle plumes, the great columns of heat that feed volcanoes, lose strength. The crust thickens, hardens, resists motion. Volcanoes, those ancient mouths of fire, grow silent. Their plumes of smoke and ash, once fountains of creation, thin to a memory. The great chains, the Andes, the Cascades, the island arcs that arc across the oceans, go dark one by one. They remain as monuments, black cones against the horizon, their flanks carved by wind and time, their hearts cooled to stone. The air clears, the nights grow still, the earth exhales less and less until the breath of its inner fire is a rare and precious thing. Without constant eruption, the cycle of renewal slows. The carbon that once moved freely between crust and atmosphere becomes locked away in rock. The sky loses its trace of volcanic haze. Weather grows gentle, predictable, almost serene. The planet's heartbeat has slowed to a steady hum. The oceans, too, feel the change. For millions of years, heat from below shaped the deep currents, driving the slow conveyor belts that circulate water from pole to equator, from light to dark. As that heat fades, the great currents weaken. The seas cool and still. Storms lose some of their fury. Hurricanes spin with less energy, their paths more narrow, their lifetimes shorter. Even the tides, ruled by the moon's distant pull, seem calmer, their rhythm unchanged, but their echoes softened by a quieter world. Continents continue their long migration, but their pace becomes glacial. Ridges that once spread apart to birth new crust slow their divergence. Subduction zones swallow fewer slabs of seafloor. The drift of land slows until mountains become ancient memories of motion. Erosion takes command, wind and rain wearing down what fire once raised. The sharpness of the world blunts, its edges round. The earth is smoothing itself, returning to calm symmetry. It is strange to imagine a world so quiet. For billions of years, we have known the earth as restless, creative, volatile. To see it slow is to witness the planet growing old, not in decay, but in wisdom. The heat that once drove chaos is now teaching balance. The crust becomes strong, the air steady, the seas reflective and deep. The earth, in cooling, becomes a place of long peace. In such a world, life would change as well. Species that once thrived on disturbance, in fertile volcanic soils, or in the deep heat of hydrothermal vents, would fade. Others, those that love constancy and equilibrium, would flourish. Forests might spread across continents untouched by mountain building or fire. Oceans, rich but slow-moving, would nurture long-lived creatures that measure time not in years but in centuries. A world without cataclysm becomes a sanctuary for endurance. The skies of this quieter earth would be clear and pale, the sunlight soft, the weather steady. Clouds would form and dissolve with rhythm rather than drama. Rain would come not in violence, but in patience, nourishing lands that have forgotten extremes. The planet would turn beneath a calm atmosphere, the balance between sea and sky perfected by the cooling within. Yet even peace has consequences. Without the churning of the mantle, the carbon cycle, that ancient dialogue between rock, water, and air, begins to falter. Volcanoes no longer return carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, and over millions of years, the gas becomes trapped in stone. The air thins, grows colder. The greenhouse blanket fades. Ice begins to creep outward from the poles, slow but certain. Glaciers spread, white and patient, reflecting sunlight back into space. The world cools not only from within, but from without. At first, this will seem gentle, longer winters, clearer skies, but as the ages pass, the transformation deepens. The oceans begin to freeze along their edges. Continents glitter under sheets of frost. This is not a violent apocalypse, but a slow surrender. The earth exhaling the last warmth of its youth. Still, the heart below remains alive. Even as the crust thickens and the mantle stiffens, heat continues to rise in faint, persistent plumes. Geothermal oases dot the frozen world, pockets of steam and liquid water where warmth still lingers. Around those places, life clings, bacteria, moss, perhaps creatures adapted to long, cold, and thin light. The core, though fading, continues to give. If one could look at the Earth from space during this age, it would appear serene, a pale blue and white marble turning slowly beneath a golden sun. The continents would shine with ice, the seas dark and still. Auroras might still shimmer faintly at the poles, though weaker as the magnetic field declines. The planet would look at peace, and it would be. In this stillness, time itself changes meaning. Erosion becomes the dominant artist, carving continents into smooth plains. Rivers wind lazily through frozen valleys. Mountains shrink into memories. The landscape becomes a sculpture of endurance, not newness, not destruction, but continuity. Perhaps by then the Earth will be so calm that no sound remains louder than wind or water. No thunder, no eruption, no quake, only the steady whisper of a world at rest. A planet that began in fire will have found its way to silence, and in that silence, it will hold everything it ever created, every fossil, every layer of stone, every trace of life preserved by the cold. This quiet age will not be sad. It will be the natural completion of a story, the final movement of a symphony that began in chaos. The Earth is not dying. It is composing its coda. Each degree of lost heat, each extinct volcano, each inch of settled crust is part of a grand harmony, motion yielding to form, energy yielding to beauty. Cooling is not erasure. It is memory made permanent. The warmth of the early planet shaped oceans and air. Its fading warmth will shape stillness and preservation. If someone someday could touch the crust of this far future Earth, they would feel not emptiness, but history, a world that remembers itself in every grain of rock. The planet has learned how to rest. The fire has become patience. The eruption has become reflection. The storm has become calm. And through it all, the core continues its long, slow exhale, a whisper that began in creation and will end only when the last ember cools to silver. The Earth's story continues, but its tempo has slowed to a near whisper. Time, once marked by the fury of storms and the roar of volcanoes, now moves with the softness of light over ice. The core has grown, solid and bright within, its liquid mantle thinner, its motion quieted. The magnetic field that once wrapped the planet like an invisible shield has weakened, its strength reduced to a faint memory of the old dynamo's rhythm. Above, the sun burns stronger, older, hotter, more insistent. It is not a cruel change, at least not yet. The increase in sunlight is gradual, almost tender. But over millions of years, light becomes heat, and heat becomes transformation. The delicate balance between the planet's cooling heart and the sun's warming hand begins to shift. The core gives less, the sun gives more. The equilibrium that has kept oceans liquid and air gentle begins to tilt. At first, the difference is subtle. Ice at the poles melts earlier in the year, the sea levels rise, and mist gathers along coasts that have known only calm. Rivers run faster for a while, lakes deepen. Then, as the centuries turn to millennia, warmth overtakes the calm. The planet that once cooled itself through fire begins to heat again from above. But this new heat is shallow. It touches only the skin of the world, not its soul. Without a strong magnetic field, the solar wind begins to sculpt the upper atmosphere. Tiny particles of air, ionized by sunlight, are brushed away into space. It is a slow erosion, atom by atom, like breath fading into the cold. Over eons, the sky grows thinner, the deep blues pale to silver, the clouds become fewer, the winds quieter. The planet that once spoke in thunder now whispers in sighs of light. Yet still, the Earth endures. The oceans, though reduced, gleam with clarity. The continents shine with minerals polished by endless wind. Deserts widen, but they are beautiful, vast plains of mirrored sand reflecting the golden light of a swollen sun. The planet looks serene from space, luminous, almost glass-like. It has become a world of reflection, of silence, of grace. The crust, thickened by billions of years of cooling, has become strong and crystalline. Continents no longer move in restless drift. They have settled into final positions, like the pieces of a puzzle finally at peace. Mountain ranges are ancient ghosts, softened into smooth arcs by erosion and time. The mantle beneath moves only faintly, enough to release the last quiet breaths of geothermal warmth. Here and there, faint tremors pass like sighs through the rock, the Earth's old heartbeat still present, but almost at rest. In this age, the sky holds new colors. With the thinning of the atmosphere, sunlight scatters differently. The horizon glows in pale gold and violet hues. The night is darker, filled with stars sharp as crystal. Auroras, once fierce ribbons of green and red, are faint now, soft veils at the poles, whispers of what was once the Earth's great shield. They shimmer like the planet's memory of its youth. As the field weakens further, cosmic rays reach the surface more easily. The planet responds in kind. Life, if it remains, retreats beneath the surface into rock and shadow. Tiny organisms cling to warmth around the last geothermal springs, nourished by the slow decay of radioactive elements. They live without sunlight, without seasons, without sky. Theirs is a quiet existence, simple, patient, unafraid of endings. Above them, the Earth continues its long metamorphosis. The oceans recede, leaving behind glittering salt plains and shallow basins where reflections replace waves. The air thins until only high plateaus and deep valleys hold breathable traces. From space, the planet still looks alive, its color shifting from blue to white, then to the faint shimmer of stone and salt. It is no longer the Earth of forests and storms. It is the Earth of light and memory. The sun grows larger in the sky. It is older now, its hydrogen nearly gone, its core contracting, its outer layers expanding in slow brilliance. The warmth that once gave life now presses harder, painting the surface in gold and crimson. But the Earth meets this brightness with stillness. It does not resist, it reflects. Every mountain, every desert, every frozen ocean gleams with the calm of acceptance. There will come a time when the remaining atmosphere becomes too thin to carry clouds. Rain will cease, replaced by dew that forms in brief, delicate moments of cooling before dawn. The air will be still, the seas reduced to gleaming mirrors beneath the brightening sun. And beneath it all, deep inside, the Earth's core will glow faintly, not from motion now, but from memory. The last warmth of the planet will be held within its iron crystal heart, as if the world were keeping one small ember alive in the vast quiet. When that ember finally fades, the transformation will be complete. The core will be fully solid, the magnetic field gone, the mantle unmoving. The Earth will no longer tremble, no longer shift or breathe. It will have reached geologic peace, a planet finished with motion, content to turn slowly under its aging star. The days will lengthen to impossible spans. The sun will rise and set only after many thousands of years. The sense of time that once belonged to humanity will have no meaning here. And yet, even in that long stillness, beauty will remain. The glassy plains will reflect the sun's light like a billion mirrors. The thin air will bend the horizon into luminous halos. The mountains, ground smooth by eons of erosion, will glow with a kind of mineral wisdom. Every stone will tell a story of fire and cooling, of birth and rest. The planet, silent and radiant, will not seem dead, only complete. The sun, in its final brightness, will look upon the earth as one might look upon an old friend, changed, quiet, but still familiar. And when the time comes for the sun to expand, to cast off its outer layers and wash the inner planets in flame, the earth will not fight. It will meet the light the way it always has, with patience, with grace, with silence. For billions of years, it has carried life and ocean, storm and fire. It has turned through youth, through violence, through growth, and now through peace. Its cooling was never a decline. It was preparation for this, the last harmony between stone and star. And when the light finally takes it, there will be no destruction, only reunion. The iron in the core, the silicon in the crust, the carbon in the old air, all will return to the cosmic sea from which they came. The atoms will scatter into the universe to someday form new worlds, new hearts, new beginnings. For the earth, the cooling of its core was not an ending. It was the path toward belonging, to the universe, to time, to silence. And in that silence, the memory of every storm, every forest, every heartbeat will remain. Because nothing is ever truly lost in the great rhythm of creation. It only changes form and waits to shine again. There comes a time when a planet chooses reflection over fire, not in a single moment, not with a single sign, but as a gradual leaning toward light, a decision made grain by grain, crystal by crystal, until the world is more mirror than engine. Earth, having spent its youth in motion and its maturity in balance, enters this era quietly. The core's last warmth is folded inward like a hidden ember. The mantle moves in long, shallow sighs. The crust is a mosaic of minerals polished by wind, frost, and time. Seas no longer roar. What remains of the oceans lies in inland basins and deep, ancient trenches, their surfaces still as glass, catching the sun's angle and sending it back to the sky. Along the edges of continents, salt plains shimmer in pale sheets, white maps of vanished tides. Where river deltas once braided through green silt, there are fans of quartz sand, each grain a tiny lens. The world has become a gallery of reflections, ice tongues glazing high valleys, feldspar plates flashing along mountain flanks, lakes that are more light than water. Clouds, once the painters of weather, are rare and thin. With the air drawn down over ages and the field's protection softened, the sky is a paler blue, washed with metallic undertones near the horizon. Dawn arrives as a long burn of gold that lingers. Dusk departs reluctantly, dragging violet into the upper air. At night, the stars knife through the darkness with crystalline edges. The Milky Way arches not as a haze, but as a river of individual points. Auroras, when they appear, are veils faint as breath, a memory of the old magnet songs, light whispered rather than sung. In this age, the land is clean-boned. Mountains that once thrust their serrated spines into storm now rise as rounded domes, their cores exposed, granite cathedrals, gneiss tapestries, basaltic tables that read like chapters of a book left open. Glaciers inhabit the highest shadows, more statue than flow, their crevasses sealed by centuries of cold. Winds are patient, not fierce. They move dust across continents in slow caravans, polishing rock faces to a satin sheen, filling basins with layers thin and even as the pages of a folio. The planet is not empty. It is attentive. Every surface answers light with composure. Mica flakes wink in riverbeds that carry more memory than water. Chert ribs, once reef, catch the sun at shallow angles and flare like struck steel. On the old sea floors, iron oxides bloom in quiet ochre, a last expression of oxygen's long reign. Life has not vanished, but it has retired to the margins where continuity is still possible. Beneath the surface, the last warm aquifers thread through fractured rock. They feed caverns of mineral sculpture and microbial lightlessness, chemolithotropes harvesting energy from the patient chemistry of stone, biofilms lacquered to walls like varnish that never dries. Around geothermal whispers, the Earth's remaining exhalations, communities persist in intimate economies, hydrogen traded for sulfate, methane swapped for a slow trickle of inorganic favor. They are civilizations of brevity and endurance at once. Populations rise and fall on clocks set by mineral flux and poor geometry. Yet the lineage endures because the conditions, though austere, are steady. At the surface, the last botanical gestures are sparse but elegant. Cushion forms cling to frost shadows, their tissues loaded with sugars that glass rather than freeze. Lichen mosaics lay maps over stone that no hand drew, pigments calibrated for a sun that is both brighter and farther along in its life. When rare mists roll in from the basins before dawn, these organisms drink from air rather than soil, beating moisture along filaments no thicker than ash. They write their brief diaries in growth rings too narrow to see, celebrating seasons measured in decades. Water has become a jewel, more light than liquid. In polar craters and deep chasms, it persists as crystal sheets under dust lids, silent reservoirs that trade vapor with the sky at a pace akin to mountain growth. Where it pools at all, it takes the shape of perfect geometry, hexagons along shallow pans, wavelets that do not travel but merely tremble once when wind touches them, then decide to be still again. The whisper of evaporation is a music so thin it could be mistaken for silence. If there is a language spoken here, it is the grammar of angles. Sunlight arrives with intent, and every facet answers. Feldspar twinning flashes on cliff faces. Calcite plains shoot spears of brilliance across ravines. Obsidian remembers a molten youth by turning into a blade of day. Quartz sand organizes into ripples whose shadows speak more clearly than their crests. Even the air participates. Halos ring the sun in precise radii when ice dust hangs at the right height, and pillar arcs lift above the horizon like columns holding up nothing but themselves. The earth has become a study in restraint. Its motions are long thoughts rather than impulses. A slope fails not with a slide but with a settling. A valley does not widen with flood but with the thin blade of diurnal fatigue. Thermal stress has replaced tempest as the principal artist of change. Rocks inhale warmth and exhale it across spans of time that make centuries feel like weather. Seams open the width of a hair, accept a dusting of frost, then close again with a soft click, an edit in the manuscript of a ridge. Without a global magnetic shield, the star writes more directly on the topmost pages of the atmosphere. Ion tails stream away in daylight, subtle plumes whose totals only matter over epochs. The sky is not stolen so much as exchanged. Atoms offer themselves to the wind beyond, and the wind beyond writes back in photons and particles that paint thin auroras at latitudes where old maps show wheat fields and cities. The planet abides, neither resisting nor collapsing, but practicing the discipline of release. It is in this era that Earth fulfills its title as mirror, not merely reflective in physics, but reflective in meaning. Everything the planet once was is preserved in the way it catches light. Old deltas shine with the outline of vanished rivers. Ancient shorelines draw ghost coasts around basins now salted to white. Dune seas hold the memory of winds now retired, each crest a sentence in a language that says, "We were here and we moved." Ophiolites, Slabs of former oceanic crust carried onto continents in a time of vigor lay open like atlases, their pillow lavas and serpentinized peridotites polished to a museum finish by a climate that prefers preservation to invention. There are nights when meteors stitch brief stitches across the sky. They do not often reach the ground whole. Most flare and powder in the upper air, brushing it with dust that settles as a faint gleam on morning pans. Occasionally, a larger stone arrives intact. Its crater is a bowl of order, the ejecta rays both signature and ornament. In a world of long repose, these arrivals feel less like violence and more like punctuation, commas in a paragraph that knows how to breathe. The moon, farther now, hangs smaller and sharper. Its libration is a slow nod rather than a sway. On the hemisphere that faces the moon, shadows of long mountain chains trace arcs tuned to its pale geometry. On the far side of Earth, the night appears taller, the constellations more architectural. The tides remain, a metronome audible only to stone. The crust flexes micrometers, basins accustomed to glass quiver and settle again. The old dance continues, only softer. If any sentience lingers here, whether born of biology or built long ago and left to contemplate, its days are not divided by urgency. It measures time by the procession of shadows along a particular cliff face, by the recurrence of a halo around the sun at the cold height of year, by the slow drift of the south magnetic remnant across a basalt plain where compass needles no longer agree but still whisper of irons. Memory. Its archives are not in servers, but in polished cores of rock, in thin sections held to the light, in maps of reflections rather than emissions. The last weather worth naming is katabatic, air that rolls down from high ice, smooth and inevitable as silk poured from a bowl. It carries the faint scent of nothing, which is to say, it carries the planet's composure. When it arrives at basins, salt plates tremble in their frames. When it leaves, it takes nothing with it but heat too fine for thermometers to notice. On certain mornings, the sun lifts with a disk slightly swollen by the remaining atmosphere. It climbs, it sharpens. By afternoon, it is a hard coin. Even so, the world is prepared. Surfaces have grown to like light. Minerals have arranged themselves to return what they cannot use. The albedo is the planet's final art, a choreography of sending back what would overwhelm, a courtesy offered to a star that has loved too intensely. The crust's last gentle movements take place where ancient slabs, long ago subducted and laid to cool, have left buoyant roots. There, isostasy makes its last corrections, raising old highlands by the depth of a fingernail in a millennium. Rivers, when and where they still exist, follow inherited paths incised in epochs of wetter air, their beds armored in pebbles with faces so smooth that water cannot resist caressing them. They do not flood, they negotiate. Each bend is a treaty between slope and friction, renewed in silence. In cavern systems under high plateaus, ice grows in organs, stalactites of frost that advance grain by grain, season by season. They ring very softly when drops fall in temperatures just shy of glass. Walls glow with thin biofilms that have chosen pigments for a spectrum that leans toward white and gold. When the wind above is still enough, one can hear the earth tick, rock releasing stored heat into air a fraction colder, sand settling in its own shadow, a distant plate making peace with the idea of being continent forever. From orbit, Earth is luminous. It has become the kind of planet that teaches by appearance. No need to map tectonic plates or atmospheric cells to understand its truth. It is self-evident in the way light moves across it. At Terminator, the line between day and night draws a blade across deserts that ignite and then snuff in silence. At noon, polar caps flare like beacons. At midnight, mountain ice breathes a low blue that instruments note, but language fails to elevate. The world says, "I remember everything. Look how I hold it." As the sun proceeds toward its own transformation, its color warms. Spectra tilt. The photon census shifts. The planet receives and returns accordingly. Basalts darken and drink. Salts blaze and give back. Ices do both depending on angle. There is no panic in this exchange. It is etiquette at astronomical scale. The star offers, the planet reflects, both bow. Eventually, the atmosphere will thin to the point where sound becomes local. Shouts would not carry valley to valley even if there were throats to make them. What does carry is radiance, not heat as we knew it, moving in gusts and fronts, but brightness itself, rearranging the world's palette hour by hour. Shadows lengthen to kilometers without smearing. Mirages step forward from flatlands with crisp edges, then retreat, leaving the dunes untroubled. If a traveler could walk here carefully, with respect for fragility, they would leave little trace. Footprints would be patterns of reflection altered, not depressions. A path would be a series of slightly less bright decisions. They would learn to navigate by gleam, a mica seam that points west, a lake that knows how to keep the sun between itself and the walker all afternoon, a salt spire that holds noon like a spike of ice holds a flame. In such a world, endings are softened into transitions. What we once called extinction becomes curation. What we once called erosion becomes editing. The archives of life and motion are not lost. They are made legible. Sedimentary layers peel open like pages. Igneous dikes frame chapters. Metamorphic fabrics annotate with arrows of mica and amphiboly that say, pressure here, heat there, time everywhere. It is tempting to call this age lonely, but loneliness implies a lack of attention, and attention is the one thing Earth has in abundance now. Everything attends to light. Everything answers it with the best of its angles. The planet is present to its star, present to its own past, present to any eyes that might be unlucky or blessed enough to see it this way. There will be a day when the sun swells past compatibility. The mirror will not break. It will be taken back into the furnace that birthed it. Before that, there will be a long procession of perfect mornings and perfect evenings. Each one will complete a sentence begun when iron first fell inward and made a heart. Each one will translate heat into memory with a brush so fine it leaves no stroke. And when, at last, the light deepens beyond kindness, the earth will meet it with the skill it has been practicing for ages. It will return what it can and accept what it must. Salt will pour into light and become pure brightness. Ice will sublimate not with a hiss, but with a sigh. Rock will redden and then glow from within as if remembering magma. In the upper air, atoms will choose flight. In the lower, minerals will choose form. At the center, iron, always iron, will hold its lattice until the lattice is no longer relevant. A planet's last virtue is composure. Earth found it not in youth, not in vigor, but here in the era of mirrors. Composure is not stillness. It is a kind of exquisite timing, the ability to give back to the universe exactly what it asks for, no more, no less. The core cooled to learn it. The seas withdrew to improve it. The mountains rounded to demonstrate it. So the world turns, slow enough that day is a festival and night a consecration. Each rotation writes a faint ring somewhere, in lake salts, in cave ice, in the spiral of a dust devil that chooses geometry over drama. If there was ever a purpose to the long cooling, perhaps it was to arrive at this, a planet that is all memory and light, an object that teaches not by force or by flux, but by grace. When Earth becomes a mirror, it does not disappear, it becomes legible. It offers itself as a final clear page in a book whose earlier chapters were scribbled in fire and storm. Anyone who reads it, creature, machine, or distant intelligence tracing spectra across centuries, will learn the same lesson written 1,000 ways across its face. Motion can become form, heat can become clarity, a heart can become a lamp. And somewhere beneath the brightest noon of this late age, a thin sheet of water holds a windless sky so perfectly that for a moment the planet and the heavens are indistinguishable. You could place a stone there and not be sure whether it fell upward or down. The ripple that follows is the last poem of Earth, a circle of light expanding, then resting, then leaving the surface as precise as before. The mirror keeps its promise. It reflects, it remembers, it waits. And the sun, seeing itself more clearly than ever, continues toward its own transformation, carrying with it the image of a world that learned how to shine by learning how to cool. To understand the last chapters of Earth, it helps to visit worlds that began reading ahead. Some cooled quickly, some surrendered their fields, some learned to endure without seas. They are not tragedies. They are lessons written in basalt and ice, in silent skies and magnetic memories. Each one offers a page that the Earth will turn eventually, with patience and grace. Mars is a red rehearsal of quiet. Once, its sky held clouds of water and storms that braided valleys. Rivers ran long enough to carve deltas, to write fans on crater floors, to leave behind clays that only persistent water can make. Underfoot, the crust remembers a time when a dynamo hummed. Ancient rocks are magnetized, their iron grains frozen in directions that no longer match the present. Then the core cooled too fast for its size. The field faded, space weather came closer. Air thinned, water withdrew underground and into polar caps, and the planet learned the art of austerity. Now winds move dust more than water, and day to night breathes as temperature rather than tide. Yet Mars is not empty. Its silence is full of record. Permafrost holds maps of ancient lakes. Salts keep the taste of vanished shorelines. Canyon walls display layers like the pages of a careful chronicle. From this red archive, we learn when the shield sleeps, atmosphere becomes a negotiation. When the heart quiets, the surface practices memory. Mercury is endurance by density. Close to the sun, tide-warped, bombarded, it carries an iron core proportionally vast, a metal lantern wrapped in a thin, rocky shade. Its magnetic field is weak but real, a reluctant candle against the solar wind. The surface is a palimpsest of craters upon craters. Rims throw pale rays across darker plains of cooled flood basalts. Day and night are not simply light and dark here. They are extremes, heat pulling rocks open and cold drawing them shut until cliffs collapse into long, low scarps that snake for hundreds of kilometers. Mercury says gravity and metal can hold a heart's heat longer than stone alone, and even the smallest field reshapes the conversation with the sun. The moon is Earth's companion and sample. Tidal locking made its face a study in asymmetry. Mare basalts fill basins on the near side. The far side is highland bright, thicker crusted, crater rich. With no air and little internal heat left to animate it, the moon keeps time via impacts and sunlight. Its seas are cooled lava. Its mountains rim the ghosts of catastrophic basins. Footprints last because weather forgot how to erase. Seismometers once heard it ring, not hollow, but elastic and dry, the sound of a world that has traded water for vacuum and wind for patience. The moon teaches us that stillness can be articulate. It also whispers that tidal energy is a long rope between worlds, As it drifted outward, Earth's spin eased, and both partners moved toward balance. Venus is a counterpoint, hot quiet rather than cold. Its rotation is slow, retrograde, its dynamo sleeps, yet the sky is vigorous, a super-rotating engine of cloud and sulfur that laces the planet in perpetual overcast. Here, loss of a field met abundance of air and heat, and the result was a greenhouse that chose constancy at a higher set point. The crust may overturn in sweeps rather than in plates. Volcanoes may still write fresh strokes under the veil. Venus says, cooling and heating are not moral tales. They are choices made by composition, distance, and time. A world can fall quiet and remain fierce. It can silence its core and still speak thunder through chemistry and cloud. Icy moons are paradox, freezing surfaces above warm hearts. Europa carries an ocean under glass, its cracked shell etched with lineae where tides knead and warm the interior. Enceladus plumes water into space from tiger-stripe fissures, a faint but persistent breath that proves heat still reaches the boundary between rock and sea. Here, the engine is not radioactive decay alone, but tidal friction, gravity grinding ice like a mill, turning orbit into warmth. These worlds reveal another path to endurance. Even when a core is small, motion between bodies can keep pockets of time liquid. They are reminders that cooling rarely means uniformity. It means mosaics of climate and chemistry, layered by depth and distance. Ganymede holds a secret Earth envies and has a magnetic field unique among moons. Its interior, metal or salty oceans dancing under the push-pull of Jupiter, sustains a weak magnetosphere of its own. The lesson is subtle. The recipe for a field is not one recipe. It is a family of dances where convection, composition, and rotation find ways to agree. If one instrument quiets, thermal buoyancy, another can play, compositional buoyancy. Earth's field lives today in the same principle and will one day rest when the orchestra runs out of scores. Beyond our neighborhood, exoplanets multiply the parable. Hot Jupiters lean into their suns, tidally locked with day-sides that blaze and night-sides that glow in borrowed light. Their winds move heat like conveyor belts under a permanent noon. Super-Earths and mini-Neptunes blur the line between rock and gas. Some may carry oceans without bottoms, water held at pressures that make ice denser than stone, layers stacked like chapters, steam, ocean, high-pressure ice, rock, metal. On tidally locked rocky worlds and habitable zones of small stars, day and night divide hemispheres. There, a magnetic field could be the difference between an atmosphere that walks from day to night and one that is pulled apart, between a climate that stitches heat across the terminator and one that leaves an eye of fire and a cap of frost. These planets show Earth not its fate but its context, a spectrum of possibilities governed by the same handful of verbs: rotate, orbit, heat, cool, reflect. There are older stories still, white dwarf worlds that circle the corpses of suns, their skies dim except when flares sweep by, their histories written in elements rather than weather. There are rogue planets adrift between stars, darkness their climate, internal heat their only candle. Some may keep oceans under shells of ice, heated by long-lived isotopes, a slow clock ticking under a wandering sky. From them, Earth learns what remains when the star is not the metronome. Geology by itself can make a home for time. If we place these worlds along a line, Mercury's iron lamp, Venus's hot hush, Mars's thin memoir, Luna's museum, Europa's undersea choir, Enceladus's plume-lit chapel, Ganymede's quiet dynamo, the locked hemispheres of red dwarf company, the widowed planets of interstellar night, we do not see a hierarchy. we see variations on balance. Every world negotiates between keeping heat and letting it go, between holding air and giving it back, between moving fast enough to stir and slow enough to last. Earth has been fortunate in its settings, big enough to hold warmth, wet enough to move carbon, distant enough to temper fire, companioned by a moon that steadied its tilt and stretched its days. Its quieting core is not a failure, but the next clause in a sentence most worlds have already written in other tenses. From Mars, Earth borrows the warning that fields matter and that memory endures even without them. From Mercury, it borrows the comfort that metal hearts linger long. From the Moon, it borrows the promise that stillness can be clear and generous. From Venus, the humility that different roads lead to different calms, some bright, some brooding. From Europa and Enceladus, hope that warmth can be braided from gravity when fire wanes. From tidally locked exoplanets, the reminder that light and dark can share a world if winds and fields agree. From rogue planets, the last austere truth, even alone, a world can keep an ember for ages if it learns to spend heat slowly. The parallels are not predictions, they are parables. Earth will not become Mars exactly, nor Venus, nor a moon of ice. It will become itself more fully, the same way an elder's face is not a copy of any other elder, but a resonance with the whole of age. Its oceans will choose their last basins, its air will choose its last hues, its core will choose a lattice and keep it. Magnetism will dim, memories will brighten, light will do more work than wind, and geometry will stand where geology ran. There is one more mirror, time. On other worlds, we see our own durations lengthened or compressed. A Venus day longer than its year shows us that rotation and revolution are siblings that do not always agree. A Mercury dawn that pauses and reverses teaches that sunrise is choreography, not law. Europa's ice that heals its fractures reminds us that surfaces can be both manuscripts and skin. Mars's blue sunsets, scattering red out of the beam, remind that color is an interpretation, not a constant. All of these subtleties fold back into Earth's late life. When days stretch, when skies thin, when reflection replaces convection, perception itself will change, if there are eyes to witness, becoming slower, more precise, more attentive to edges than to flux. Across the gallery of cooled and cooling worlds, one refrain returns: composure. Planets do not panic. They negotiate with energy across aeons. They store it in fields, release it in plumes, capture it in crystals, return it in light. Even endings are arrangements, atmospheres traded with space, heat traded with night, motion traded for form. A magnetic field is a chapter, a core is a candle, a sea is a song that can be rewritten in salt and stone. So Earth walks on, reading the elder worlds not as dooms, but as tutors. It keeps what it must, the slow turn, the moon's leash, the honesty of gravity, and lets go of what it can, excess heat, hurried days, loud weather. Its future is not to become less Earth, but to become more clearly Earth, a planet that translates heat into history and sunlight into sculpture, that remembers with minerals and teaches with mirrors. When the tour is done and we return our gaze homeward, the lesson feels surprisingly gentle. There are many ways to be quiet. Mars chose thin air and dust, Mercury, metal and day-night stone, the Moon, vacuum and archive, Venus, cloud and permanence, Europa and Enceladus, ice above ocean, the wanderers, warmth without stars. Earth will choose its own arrangement, blue turning to white, field to echo, fire to lattice, weather to light. And in that choice, we will recognize a family resemblance that stretches from the first molten hours to the last reflective centuries. The universe does not insist that worlds be loud to be alive. It allows them to age into clarity. And if there is a purpose to looking outward from a cooling core, it is this: to learn how to meet the future with the same calm the elder worlds already wear, to practice composure while we still have seas, while the field still sings, while the aurora still lifts its soft green script at the poles. Earth listens, it slows, it learns the art that Mercury, Mars, the moon, the icy choir, and the distant locked hemispheres already know. When the engine grows quiet, the mirror grows true. And in that truth, a planet does not end. It becomes legible. Deep inside every stone, there is handwriting. Not letters, not words, but lines, orientations, the tilt of lattices, and the density of planes. The planet has always written in this script. Before humans carved runes into rock, the rock was already a language, recording pressure, temperature, chemistry, time. To read it is to listen to the slow voice of the core, translated upward through millions of years of cooling. Every mineral is a paragraph, every crystal a sentence in perfect grammar, atoms repeating in rhythm, planes of symmetry responding to laws so consistent that even silence obeys them. When heat moves through rock, when pressure changes, when atoms rearrange, the writing shifts, the same elements choosing new structures to express new conditions. A crystal lattice is not fixed. It is a choice made at a particular temperature and pressure, a memory frozen when the environment changes. The Earth's interior is a library of these decisions. Iron, the storyteller of the core, writes in two main dialects, body-centered cubic and hexagonal close-packed. At lower pressures, iron prefers the cubic, atoms at the corners and center of each cube open enough for motion. But as the weight of the planet presses inward, the structure tightens into hexagonal order, dense, efficient, aligned like reeds in a current. In this form, the inner core grows, crystal by crystal, plane by plane, each oriented by the magnetic whisper of the flow around it. Seismic waves that travel through these lattices feel the difference. Their speed depends on direction. From those delays and echoes, scientists deduce texture, the grain of the world's heart. It is as if the core, unseen, keeps a diary in the geometry of iron. Surrounding this metallic core is the vast mantle, mostly silicate minerals, perovskite, post-perovskite, bridgmanite, ferropericlase. These names sound arcane, but they are the vocabulary of Earth's interior poetry. They shift as depth changes, one structure folding into another, like sentences rewritten under new gravity. Perovskite becomes post-perovskite near the base of the mantle, where temperature and pressure twist atoms into tighter alignment. Each phase boundary is a page turn in the planet's autobiography, marked by sudden changes in how sound travels and how heat flows. The mantle is not static rock. It is a slow, breathing organ, its minerals exhaling one form and inhaling another across eons. In the upper mantle, olivine, green, glassy, the same mineral that glitters in volcanic sand, turns into wadsleyite, then ringwoodite as pressure mounts. At about 660 kilometers down, it changes again, abruptly, a transformation that guides the planet's circulation. Subducting slabs of crust pause or flatten at this depth, caught between two chapters of mineral behavior. Even the shape of continents, even the path of earthquakes, depends on where one crystal arrangement hands its role to another. Each transformation releases or absorbs heat, reshaping the gradients that drive convection. Phase changes act like punctuation, semicolons where motion hesitates, commas where it flows, The cooling of the core changes the balance of these boundaries, shifting how deep currents loop, how plumes rise, how the crust fractures and rebuilds. The mineral record is thus both consequence and witness of the deep story, the script of cooling written backward from surface to core. At the base of the mantle lies the D layer, a transitional zone so complex that even seismology speaks of it in riddles. Here, iron and magnesium silicates coexist with pools of melt. Here, post-perovskite wavers between stability and dissolution. Some believe it is a graveyard of ancient slabs, others a nursery of plumes, both true, perhaps, depending on when you look. In this layer, the Earth dreams of its past. Material from the surface, subducted long ago, still carries isotopic whispers of oceanic crust, carbonates, maybe even the faint signature of biology. When those remnants brush the core mantle boundary, they may melt and mix, adding trace flavors to the outer core's composition, stories traded between rock and metal. All of this information travels upward through seismic language. When earthquakes ring, their waves pass through every layer, their speed changing with density, their paths bending with temperature. Some arrive sooner, some later, some fade, some split. Each difference is a letter, each travel time a word. When combined, they reveal the invisible architecture beneath. It is tomography not of space, but of time. Snapshots of motion recorded in vibration. From this data, we learn that the inner core may rotate slightly faster than the mantle, that it grows unevenly, that its east side may be younger than its west. The core is not a static jewel, but a growing seed, asymmetrical yet harmonious. If you could hold a single crystal of inner core iron in your hand, impossible, but imagine. It would be translucent to X-rays, heavy beyond belief, its structure perfect yet strained. Under a microscope of pressure, it would hum. Atoms would jitter in their cages, a music of temperature so low-pitched it would take centuries to complete one note. That sound, the hum of lattice vibration, is what geophysicists call phonons, and it is how heat moves in solids. The Earth's cooling is a symphony of phonons, a collective sigh through countless crystals. The upper layers keep their own chronicles. Basalts along mid-ocean ridges record the direction of Earth's magnetic field when they cool. The polarity stripes across ocean floors are the pulse of the dynamo, each reversal frozen into stone. By reading them, scientists reconstruct the wandering of continents and the beating rhythm of the field. Even after the magnetosphere fades, these rocks will hold its memory, north and south alternating like breaths. Granites, too, hold records. Zircons inside them contain isotopes that tell of crust formation, water, and age. Some zircons in Australia are over 4.3 billion years old, tiny transparent archives older than the moon sees. Inside them are ratios of uranium to lead that tick like perfect clocks, marking how long the planet has been writing. Cooling is visible in this mineral scripture. Slower crystal growth, denser packings, more ordered lattices. Where once magma froze rapidly, producing glassy, chaotic forms, now it cools gently, forming large, serene grains. The very texture of rock reflects the planet's pulse rate. Young worlds make fine-grained confusion. Mature worlds make calm mosaics. Geologists, when they thin section a stone and slide it under polarized light, see not only beauty, but tempo, the difference between hurry and composure, between molten urgency and patient solidification. At smaller scales, defects tell stories too. Dislocations, the tiny misalignments where a crystal's perfection slips, mark where stress once lived. In deep minerals, they record the direction of mantle flow. In the core's imagined lattice, They might mark where one domain of growth met another, a seam of time embedded in metal. Just as wrinkles record a lifetime of expression, these defects record the planet's expressions of force. Even now, as cooling proceeds, new minerals continue to form in the unlikeliest places. Under subduction zones, where water is dragged deep, superhydrous phases carry hydrogen to the lower mantle. In ultra-high pressure pockets, carbon crystallizes into diamond, then graphite, then diamond again. Endless reincarnation of structure. The deep earth is a monastery of transformations, each mineral a monk repeating its mantra of symmetry through cycles of pressure and heat. As the world cools further, some of these transformations will slow beyond recognition. Diffusion, the migration of atoms that enables change, will stall. Boundaries will freeze. Textures will become permanent, like inscriptions in basalt left by vanished rivers. The core's solid iron will stop growing when all melt is gone. The mantle will become a single crystalline continent beneath the crust. Then, the planet's language will shift from active voice to perfect tense. It has written. Its last words will be those of structure, symmetry achieved, not in dynamic balance, but in rest. But even rest is eloquent. In a cooled core, the alignment of iron grains will still remember flow. In the silicate mantle, the tilt of crystals will still point toward ancient convection rolls. In the crust, the mineral chemistry will still whisper of the surface oceans that once existed above. To those who know how to read it, a dead planet is not silent. It is an open book. Perhaps far in the future, when the sun has changed and the Earth's surface is pale glass and salt, some wandering mind, organic or machine, native or visitor, will cut into the rock and hold a fragment to the light. Inside will be banding, zoning, inclusions, fractures, isotopes, orientations, a full biography. It will tell how a molten sphere became a sanctuary for life, how that life changed the air, how the planet cooled and slowed and learned to rest. It will not speak in sound, but in structure, and that reader, if it has patience, will hear the same message repeated in every lattice, every atom, every symmetry axis. To endure, one must learn how to change form without losing essence. To last, one must turn energy into order and motion into memory. The minerals already know this. They have known it since the first cooling drop of magma solidified 4.5 billion years ago. The rest of the planet, oceans, air, life, has only been catching up. When the last warmth finally settles, it does not vanish. It diffuses. It becomes something softer than fire, a balance between the energy that once was and the stillness that will remain. The Earth, 4.5 billion years after its birth, has completed the slowest act of transformation in the solar system, the journey from flame to form, from motion to composure. Inside the core, the final droplets of molten iron crystallize and join the solid lattice. There is no flash, no quake, no noise, only a change in symmetry. The last convective currents fade into stillness, and the magnetic field, once a guardian, once a painter of auroras, ebbs into memory. The planet's compass needles would point nowhere now, but there are no hands left to hold them. The outer core, once a restless ocean of metal, is solid. Its ripples have turned into structure. The great circulation that carried heat outward and power upward is finished, and in that completion lies a profound kind of peace. The heart that once beat with magma has learned how to rest. Above it, the mantle is crystalline, a single slow body of silicate symmetry. Where convection once churned, now there is only conduction, heat creeping atom to atom, a whisper of energy measured in millimeters per millennium. No more plumes, no more subduction, no more continents on pilgrimage. The crust above is ancient and thick, a carapace of memory that has stopped rewriting itself. The surface is a sculpture of all that came before, rivers now glass, mountains now dunes of crystal dust, basins now mirrors. The sky, thin as breath, has become a prism. Sunlight enters as gold and leaves as white. Scattering no longer paints blue, refraction has grown too faint. Daylight is pure, uncolored, absolute. At night, the stars are diamond sharp, their spectra unblurred by moisture or wind. The moon still turns around the earth, far away, the distance now too wide for tides to move stone. It has become a slow sentinel, watching over a world that no longer needs guarding. From space, the earth glows faintly silver, not from internal heat, that has long since joined the background hum of cosmic cold, but from reflection. It reflects perfectly, every surface polished by time, every particle of dust aligned by gravity and frost. It is no longer blue, nor white, nor green. It is a mirror with memory. The sun, older now, expands toward its red giant phase. The warmth it gives is heavier, richer in light, slower in rhythm. The oceans that once sang in waves are gone. Their water has long ago drifted into space, but salts, quartz, and glass still catch the light and scatter it in halos that circle the dying star. When solar flares sweep past, they ripple across the magnetless sky like fingers over a drum that remembers its song but not its player. And though the air is thin, there is still chemistry. The rocks at the surface oxidize with a patience only eternity can afford. Silica and iron breathe their last slow exchange, forming delicate films that flash and fade in sunlight. Even in silence, reactions continue, slower than thought, slower than erosion, but faithful. The earth remains alive in the language of minerals. If one could descend now into the planet's interior, the journey would be like walking through a cathedral of matter. The crust, cold mosaics of feldspar and quartz, fracturing with quiet grace. The mantle, a single grainwork of bridgmanite and post-perovskite, frozen into geometry. The core, a monument of iron crystal, a perfect sphere of order and stillness, humming at a frequency so low it would take 1,000 years to complete a cycle. That hum, the last phonon of the planet, will continue long after all else has stilled. Sound too slow to hear, but not too slow to be real. In that hum is memory. It holds the first impact that made the moon, the first rain that filled the seas, the first spark of life in shallow bays, the first forest's breath, the first human footstep. All those vibrations, recorded not in sound but in structure, remain folded within the iron. The planet has kept everything, not as data, but as resonance. It is not forgotten. It has simply converted experience into crystal clarity. The absence of movement does not mean absence of meaning. The world has become pure record. Every atom's position is a note in the last chord of a long symphony. If one could amplify it, the earth would not sound empty. It would sound complete. A tone of absolute consonance, the sound of energy arranged perfectly, with nothing left to spend. The sun's light continues to fall upon it, even as that sun changes, even as its edges blur with age, and the earth, in its final grace, reflects that light with devotion. It becomes a lamp to the dying star, a mirror returning warmth to its source. For a while, they illuminate each other, as they have for eons, but now without tension. No weather, no field, no movement, just radiance. Two old companions exchanging brightness across the last quiet of space. Eventually, the sun will shed its outer layers and collapse inward, leaving behind a white dwarf, small, dense, and calm. Around it will drift the relics of its family: Mercury, vaporized; Venus, unbound; Earth, cool and silver, moving in widening silence. The white dwarf will shine for billions more years, its faint blue light touching the mirror Earth like a soft memory. And the planet will continue to reflect. No heat left, no air, no sea, no life, but the perfect geometry of what was. The atoms that make up the Earth will not rest forever. Radiation from the dying star will loosen some. Impacts will dislodge others. Cosmic rays will scatter fragments into the void. The planet will slowly dissolve, not in destruction, but in release. Each particle will wander, join other clouds, other stars, other planets yet to be born. The iron may sink into a new world's core. The silica may form another crust, the carbon another breath. In this way, the Earth will never truly end. It will change voice, joining the great chorus of material that sings across galaxies. From the beginning, the Earth's cooling was not an act of dying, but of preparing. It was a lesson in balance, to hold energy gently, to spend it wisely, to become still without ceasing to be. The core cooled because it had given all it needed to give. The mantle stilled because it had built all it needed to build. The surface quieted because it had already seen and shaped and sheltered all it needed to love. Now the Earth belongs entirely to time, not the ticking kind, but the vast oceanic time that holds galaxies and atoms alike, the time that erases nothing, that carries all forms in its current, that turns beginnings into continuations. The Earth's glow will fade from sight, but not from existence. It will live on in composition, in the metals and silicates scattered among the stars. Wherever a planet condenses around a new sun, a little of this one will be there, whispering of balance and beauty and calm. And so the long story ends not with silence, but with light. The light that remains after heat has gone. The light that is reflection, not emission, the gentlest kind of brightness. It is the same light that leaves a fingerprint on your eye when you watch the moon rise. It is the same light that will one day, far away, glint off a new world and remind some observer of this one. The Earth's core, once molten, then magnetic, then crystalline, has fulfilled its purpose. It has turned energy into memory. It has written every chapter of matter and life in the language of atoms, and in cooling it has not vanished, but perfected itself. Because the universe, like the Earth, does not rush toward endings. It moves toward clarity, toward peace, toward light without heat. And when the last echo of the Earth's hum dissolves into the cosmic background, it will not be a disappearance. It will be a return, a single infinite note joining the quiet music of everything that ever was.